tomorrow. And nothing's ever promised tomorrow. And nothing's ever promised tomorrow. Today, what goes around comes back around. The things that we give, we get. You can't take the heat, stay out the kitchen. Person way no work, no supposed to job. We could all be braver. Stand your ground, smile or frown if it's just a desire. Stand for a brother when he's down. He gets you one thing alone. If you be yourself, I will always be your own. If I be myself, you will always want me so. And nothing's ever promised tomorrow. And nothing's ever promised tomorrow. And nothing's ever promised tomorrow.
Think when by me, of always in the business, me. And he recollect back. Oh, cause I me be money. Oh, won't mama you. All I know what need for business, me. Or I'm he recollect me. I got them feminine. I got that no family love you. Monty Afu. I got that. Oh, I found some baby, yeah. To all, yeah. I found kill of fool, yo. I found some position, to got to get. I found kill of fool. I kill of fool, yo. Big baby,
A very good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to panel session day 2 at NAIS 2018. Keeping with the tradition here at SPE, we try to start our events on time. So I apologize for this 13 minutes delay in our start today. As you can tell, it is not our making, but we've been trying to get people coming in from the technical presentations and the exhibition, and I'm sure they will join us as we continue with the event this morning. My name is Richmond Osuji. I have the honor, privilege, and pleasure to welcome you to this second day of panel discussions. Yesterday, we looked at policy, we looked at some sort of regulatory framework, but one key word that emanated from yesterday's meeting was the fact that the resource persons we had yesterday has asked that government exercise a bit more discipline in managing the resources. I mean, examples were cited with the countries like Norway, where we see a witness that their sovereign wealth fund is in the billions, if not trillions of dollars. Exchange market, and that's remarkable. They started about the same time that we started. So with the minister urging the SPE to advise at the end of this all-important meeting what they can do with regards to policy, I'm sure by the time this communique is put together and sent to the towers for onward delivery to the villa, we would be getting some way of commitment from government and dedication to ensure that we start, as Mr. Avuru said yesterday. We may not have started things, but we can start now. There's a saying in my place that it is when you wake up that is your own dawn. That is your own morning. So once again, I welcome all of you. I welcome our council chairman. Sometimes the title seems big, but the work that comes with it is a lot. I wonder if you've been getting sleep, my council chairman, because I know you go from one meeting to another and run till 2, 3 in the morning. Please, let's give my council chairman a round of applause. Well done, sir. Well done. Amazing job. Well done. Well done. It's a rich tradition handed down from the council chairman of yesteryear to today, and it continues into our incoming for next year's NAIS. We welcome you again. And of course, we welcome our senior members, our past council chairman. Welcome our distinguished members from the academia. I see Professor Dosumu, Professor Leidare in the building. Welcome Dr. Sakama Temilola the one that our council chairman said was not just an immediate past council chairman, but it was the oracle that gave advice and counsel. Thank you very much. Thank you. ARD, we know you are currently wanting to pass on the baton, but you are still at ARD for now, and we thank you for your commitment to the SPE. Let's give ARD a round of applause. Thank you very much. Good morning. So we'll do well, again, run through the session for the next 2 hours, but please, I want to make a special appeal. My heart broke somewhat this morning when I walked in here and I was greeted with the news that 15 of our headphones are missing. I felt bad. I felt really bad. I know I have been saying it from the start on Monday that these headphones are not souvenirs. They are not souvenirs. Tochuku, let me have one of those headphones. Let me have one of those headphones. Okay, so this is technology keeps evolving. This is the first time that I have used this at a conference. And you who know me know I do conferences a lot. So this is the first time that but I have it on good authority that this has been around in the country for about 2 years. But this is my first time. So I think in the industry, SPE is the first to use it. They deserve a round of applause, please. Let's give SPE that innovative applause for doing this, okay? But why I'm holding this is to let us know that it is custom made. It cannot work with a mobile phone. It cannot work with your laptops. It cannot work with any device besides the receivers that is kept here in this hall. So if this thing leaves this place to anybody's house or office, it will not function. It becomes like stealing an iPhone in this era. If you steal an iPhone, yes, if it's my iPhone, I will crash it. I will destroy it. If it's a smartphone, if it's my own, I will destroy it. So it's useless to you. It's like stealing my ATM card without my PIN. I will block it. My ATM card went missing a couple of weeks ago. Right there where I was on phone, I blocked it. The next day, I got another one. Then, if for any reason the person decides to dispose of it by means of selling, you would not find any other sound active with the active written ACTIV. If you take it to Computer Village or anywhere, and the person knows the owner of this, they will just call him, and whoever is found with becomes, when they say police is your friend, the person truly becomes a friend of the police. You know, so all I am saying is, just in case you know anyone that has mistakenly taken it, thinking that we'll give it out as a souvenir, please advise them to bring it back to us. Me, my ushers, the security team of NAIS, the council chair, the conference chairman of NAIS, even our council chair, if you give him, he will get it. Any one of us will get it to the partners that brought this for us to use. I have enjoyed this conference because of this a lot. Because at every time I am hearing clearly, for instance, during the Women Development Program yesterday, we had a speaker who normally is not as loud as I am, but we all enjoyed him because we had this headphone. We're using lapel mics. One of the things that lapel mics does is when you increase it to a certain volume for people to hear clearly, it gives a feedback. We didn't have that problem because of this. So the guys at the console reduced the volume of the lapel to the minimum, but we could all still hear. Let's encourage this kind of innovations. Let's encourage people in this kind of business. Let's frown at anyone who has walked away from this hall with this. If we find them anywhere, even if we find them in Taipei, Taiwan, tell them to return it. There's only one sound active. Thank you very much. I really was saddened when I heard it this morning. Let's encourage this kind of innovations. Thank you. So welcome you. We welcome sister organizations in the industry who have been coming to this conference since we started. I see the chairman of PLAN, Pipeline Professionals Association of Nigeria, Engineer Jeff Ono, I will welcome you. Thank you for being here. You as well for being here. These are associations in the industry, and as my council chair said when we started, all of them being here is a show of the collaboration moving forward. So when they all with that is gradually driving the country and government policies in the direction that will benefit more and more of Nigerians. So once again, welcome. Remember, your mobile phones, turn them to silence, and vibrations will appreciate it. The lavatories are still where they are. To the right on the exit lobby of the convention center. Please take care of your personal valuables. Do not put them in identical conference bags. Take care of your smartphones, your tablets, and all. It's important to always remind us of these things so that we don't have to make announcement. Oh, by the way, if you're missing a phone, yes, if you're missing a phone, please talk to me or any of the ushers. If you're missing sunglasses, talk to me or any of the ushers or any of the SPE NAIS committee members. We have two of those as lost and found. We have two missing items, sunglasses and mobile phones. And one mobile phone, please, no, not an S, one. So if you're missing it, talk to me and we'll get it to you if it is yours. We'll be glad to do that. We welcome our resource persons. We also welcome our SPE International President, who has always been with us since we started. We thank him for sharing his nuggets of wisdom with us throughout this year's conference. Today is the last panel session for NAIS 2018. Quickly, let's get into the business. And this morning, remember the whole theme for NAIS 2018 is around diversification in the economy. We've looked at it from a lot of perspectives since we started on Monday. Today, we're looking at the implication on the oil and gas supply value chain and investors. And I'm glad to see a number of service companies in the audience as well. On our panel today, we have operators, we have service companies, and we'll have you distinguished delegates to engage them. Now, remember, the only way to engage with our panel members is through the mobile app, NAIS mobile app. So don't put SPE Nigerian Council when you're looking for it. You'll not find it. Just say NAIS. You'll find the app. And when you get to the app, you get to the event section. When you get to the event section, you will click on Ask Question on the particular event, in this case, panel session 2. Then ask your question, but please tell us your name, tell us where you work, and tell us as much as possible who you are asking the question on the panel. If it's a question for all of them, also indicate. If you don't want to go via the app, indicate by a show of hand. Our ushers, our beautiful ushers, will hand you a question card through which you engage our panel members for the next session. And remember to also join the conversation on social media at SPE_Nigeria Twitter, SPE Nigeria Instagram, SPE Council on Facebook. Let's get SPE NAIS 2018 trending as much as possible. Thank you so very much. So quickly, this is what we'll do as we did yesterday. We'll take a key presentation first. After that, I will bring up our moderator and other panel members who will guide us through the session. But before all of that, I ask you to please welcome with me our council chairman as he addresses us. Please welcome Mr. Chikezie Nwosu. We can do better with the applause, please. Thank you.
Once again, good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I will stand on existing protocols, but just again to recognize one or two people. I'd like to really thank the panelists and the moderators, but especially the keynote speaker, my brother and friend, Malam Rabiu Bello, the Chief Operating Officer, Group Executive Director, Upstream for NNPC. Please appreciate him. He was with us on Monday, and for him to be able to turn around and come back again today is much appreciated. I'd also like to thank the moderator, Dr. Jude Amefule. Thank you very much, sir. In the middle of quite a sad event, that you're able to make it out here and moderate this event is much appreciated. And for the panelists, I'd like to thank every single one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come here and have what I hope will be a passionate discussion around not just the theme, because we lead from the theme into the theme of the panel session, Emerging Economic Diversification Era in Nigeria. And yesterday's panel session was about policy. Today is about having a discussion of the impact for investors, looking at the entire oil and gas supply chain. I know that the panelists, I actually know every single one of them in person, and I know that they'll do great justice to this topic. Now, yesterday I tried to give my own view about the panel session, and I was then told, you're not a panelist. And I'm not going to repeat that today. I'd just like to thank the SP International President, Mr. Darcy Spurdy, who will be playing music again this evening at our award night. Since he's been around with us, apart from attending our sessions, he's been practicing with the musical band at the co-hotel. And you need to come and, watch him entertain us with his accordion. In actual fact, I got so passionate when he was playing with the accordion that I got up and sang in my croaky voice. That will not happen again tonight. I'd also like to thank one of our former section chairman, Nigerian Council chairman, the former BOT chair, and an honorary SP member. The honorary SP membership is one of the highest, or the highest award that any SP member can get. Engineer Alex Ney, please stand up for recognition. Thank you very much. I'd like to recognize the incumbent African Regional Director for SPE, Mr. Yemi Akinlawo. Please stand up for recognition. I'd like to recognize the incoming, or they say elect, Africa Regional Director. Because when I say incoming, I'm warned that I shouldn't say incoming until he actually comes in. Professor Wumi Iledare. Please stand up for recognition. I'd like to recognize the immediate past chairman of the Society of Petroleum Engineers Nigerian Council, Dr. Saka Matemilola. Thank you. I have not seen the BOT chair. Is the BOT chair here? Okay. When he comes, I'll recognize him. Can I please ask our Board of Trustees members to all stand up for recognition as a group? Thank you very much. You will see that one of the panelists is also a Board of Trustees member. Last but not the least, I'm actually done as SP Nigerian Council chairman. The annual general meeting was held yesterday, and I was deposed yesterday. And there is a new Nigerian Council chairman for 2019 for the Society of Petroleum Engineers, Mr. Debo Fabami. Last but not the least in that hierarchy of SPE is the incoming Vice Council Chair, who will take over from Debo Fabami in 2020, and that is Mr. Joe Wakwe. So that's me done, and I would ask that the same way I urged for a passionate discussion after the keynote speech, I urged for a passionate discussion about this. The Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources and GMD and NPC have said that they do not want us to just talk. They want something to come out of this panel sessions. And we've promised them that we're going to put together not a communique. Communique is for the media, but we're going to put together a document which talks about what we advise government to do in terms of the policy directions coming out of this diversification. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I wish you very fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Chairman. Let's once again give him a round of applause. Now more than ever, I feel I should be elected into the National Assembly. So I can move a motion that will elect presidents in waiting and presidents in serving. So we'll go like, this person is president now, this one will be president after him, and that one after him. All this fighting will end. Trust me, if we do it, the fighting will end. All the wahala will end. Anyways, that's by the way. Thank you to all that he's recognized. I mean, he's done this through the days because of his appreciation for your support and encouragement in his time as council chairman. It's a teamwork out here at SP because it's a volunteered business that we do here. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll switch gears now to the theme and lead presentation, after which we'll get into the panel. Our lead speaker has attended many career advancement courses in Nigeria and abroad, including the prestigious Wanting Executive Development Program from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, USA, prior to his appointment as Chief Operating Officer upstream. He was the Group Managing Director, Corporate Planning and Strategy Division of NNPC. He was also General Manager, Competitive Analysis Department of the same division. Segment, which includes the NMPC's direct exploration and production businesses, two service companies, IDSL and NETCO, as well as the National Petroleum Investment Management Services, NAPIMS. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you as he addresses us on the theme for this panel session. As a statistician with strong mathematical background, I'm sure we'll not only hear figures today, we'll see solutions. One more time, let's welcome Malam Rabiu.
Thank you very much, and good morning all. Let me also beg to stand on the existing protocol, and a slight correction on my name. Actually, I'm not a doctor yet, Professor Ladare must have done something different. Let me also congratulate and thank SPE for these well-organized sessions as well. Mine is a short one, just to let us understand what we are trying to discuss at the panel session and the issues and challenges facing the efforts of diversification in Nigeria. I will start not working. Next. Yes, I did. Okay, next slide. So first, I will want us to put the title on in context, that what do we really mean by diversification of Nigerian economy? And how do we diversify the Nigerian economy? Some may think that increasing the non-oil revenue from the current level of about 15% to something higher is diversification. Some may think reducing the contribution of oil sector to the federal government or the Nigerian government revenue, which is currently at over 70%, is diversification. But I believe it should be beyond that. I think strategically linking the oil and gas sector to the rest of the economy is key to diversification of Nigerian economy, because the impact or the level of dependence on oil and gas means we can't do without oil and gas for now. At least for the next 20 years, the global economy rely and will continue to rely on oil and gas for a lot of things. So for Nigerian economy, I believe, okay. For Nigerian economy, I believe that there is need for energy sufficiency in the country. There's need for the energy to be supplied to the domestic economy so that we can actually diversify the economy. So I think that is the first part of the discussion I want us to discuss at the panel, to see whether or not we are really talking of real diversification of the economy. The second thing is, what role should the petroleum sector itself play in the diversification effort? And I think if you look at Nigeria, having been in the oil business for over 50 or 60 years, there's need for us to actually see how do we also domesticate, or what will be our role in domesticating the economy and diversifying the economy. And I think the first thing should be what we started maybe about 8 years ago, that is domestication of the sector itself through maximum utilization of in-country people and material resources that is used by the sector. For every barrel of oil that we produce in the country, we spend about $20 to $25 per barrel. And if we produce 2 million barrels every day, it means we need to actually spend the 2 times 25, which is $50 million every day. If that money is actually spent in country, it will go a long way in diversifying the economy. I think that's one thing that the sector can do to help in diversifying the Nigerian economy. The second will be to enable that linkage I was talking about in the beginning, that in as long as we don't actually have enough energy. And as long as Nigeria still remain power hungry, the industries remain hungry of actual power that they need to do to actually produce what they produce, or to actually produce most of the needed materials and resources the country require for the whole economy to move. We just have to ensure that as a sector we help in making that happen. So as an employer, I think there is need for the sector also to help in making that happen. But then, what do the sector players require to enable that happen? Because we really also need to see that it's not everything that the sector can do. The sector cannot be responsible for security. So we must actually also be assured of the security of life and property of those working in the sector, as well as the assets that they are investing in. So in as long as that is available, they will actually be assisted and supported to deliver on those two items. The second thing is to actually also have sustainable funding for the sector, because of course the sector requires a lot of money. If you look at about 20 to 30 billion dollar of investment across the whole sector, there is need for money from everywhere. And fortunately in Nigeria, government is a key player and investor in the sector as well. So sustainably funding, government equity funding is extremely important, and that's one of the things that I think the industry also require to enable that diversification we're talking about. The third, and also very important, I think, is the sufficient infrastructure necessary to ensure that we can actually enable those other sectors. In as long as there's no power, and as long as there's no pipeline to move the crude and products across the country, as long as there's no pipeline to distribute the gas from where it's being produced to where it's being utilized, or being required to be utilized to actually enable these sectors, we have a long way to go. And therefore, that's another very important aspect that we believe is necessary to ensure that the sector itself got what is required to help in making that diversification happen. Now, what are the current programs and strategies that government is implementing to address those challenges of security, funding, infrastructure, and all the rest of them, to actually ensure that we can diversify the economy? One, I think, is the fact that the current government has 3-point agenda that they call SEC: security, economy, and anti-corruption. If we can actually work on those and continuously move to ensure that security of life and property, especially in the oil and gas sector, is continuously being addressed, we'll be in that position. But I remember the time we were producing just about 1.2 million barrels. When we can produce 2.5 million barrels, you can see the impact of security. And if you look at that, compare with the time when we had actually low oil price, is also another problem that actually took us to the recession period that we just came out of. The second issue is the recent exiting of cash coal by the government part of the business as well. That actually shows that if government can allow the sector to function, if the funding can be sustainable, then we can also be in a position to actually help the sector also be a very good linkage and enabler to the diversification of the economy. That has happened also last year, and I think it has been confirmed by most of the operators here that we are now in a position to say that we are now in the trajectory of moving to the north to ensure that we actually make the industry a self-funding one that can attract financing from all over the place. The third issue is the implementation of Gas Master Plan. This is a government strategy and initiative that started that actually diversifies the economy. That I will talk about later again. The fourth one is the issue of rehabilitation of the midstream segment of our business. It's not just enough to produce oil and gas. Not really helping ourselves. So whatever needs to be done to ensure that we produce or we refine all the products we need, all the gas and the petroleum products that we require in the country, all the petrochemical industry products that we need in the country. If we don't domestic gas market. But to do that, again, government established the Gas Aggregation Company of Nigeria, which should be like serving as a one-stop shop for anybody who wants to invest in gas-based industry. Whether you're doing power, fertilizer, petrochemicals, when you go there, you can actually get access to gas. And that company should be the one that will actually connect the investor for the gas industry with the producer of gas so that they can establish that industry. And that is extremely important, and it's actually on and is working today. The other thing is the implementation of the sector-based pricing. Again, in the beginning, a situation whereby we are actually applying more than what we even consume domestically, we must do something strategic to ensure that the market is developed. And as part of that development of gas market, we decided that at least 5 billion cubic feet of gas need to be produced domestically and sent to the different critical sectors that will enable the development of those sectors so that we can now say, yes, we are now in a situation whereby we can have what they call the so-called willing buyer, willing seller in the market. Because without sufficiency of any product, you can never say you have a market that is viable. So to get that gas available in that economy called Nigerian economy, we decided that whatever we can do to get 5 billion cubic feet of gas into the sector, into the other sectors of the economy, power, industries, gas-based industries, and the commercial sector has to happen. And to do that, we had to have what we call sector-based pricing. And we had only three types of pricing. One pricing for gas to power, one pricing for gas to industries that can use diesel and other things, so they can actually have a comparative cheaper gas or cheaper energy. Then the third factor is the sectors that use gas for producing other products like fertilizer, petrochemicals, and other things. So if you actually get proper pricing for those to ensure that they can compete with other parts of the world in terms of those products, like fertilizer, if we can produce enough fertilizer to compete with other fertilizer producing countries, we will not only have access to foreign exchange, but we'll also be in a position to use our gas for that particular purpose. So that was why we had three types of pricing in the country, and we believe that should continue until we achieve that sufficiency in the supply of the gas so that we can now go to actual willing buyer, willing seller. Because at 5 billion cubic feet of gas, we should be in a position to say we have a stable market that can really satisfy the economy. That has happened, and I think we also have to assign domestic supply obligation to all those producing that gas to those sectors so that we can assure them of getting their gas for at least the post-foundation customers. The third one, or the seventh one, is commencing the implementation of industrial gas park. And that's what actually happened in many countries. In Saudi Arabia, they have it. In Oman, they have it, and other countries. If you have enough gas, it's also more efficient and more strategic if we can actually establish an area where all the key elements of what is required to have the industries is there. So you have the gas processing facility, you process that gas there, you give the gas to all those industries that are there, and they can produce a cheaper, more competitive cost that can be used to compete with other countries. Because everything that you do is something that you are going to take to the market. And that foreign market that is going to earn the not going to be efficient, then you are going to be in serious trouble because you may actually end up producing that you cannot sell. And that is very common in many of our industries. Even chicken, I was told that if you are to say you want to compete with chicken importation from Brazil, you need to actually produce the chicken in Nigeria and sell it at about 15 naira. To actually have a 20-cent chicken in the country is the only way you can actually compete with the chicken that you can produce from Brazil. And that the only way you can do is either to shut down the importation and ensure that you grow that your industry and ensure that you continue eating chicken. But of course, up to now, not everybody is eating chicken in Nigeria. But it only costs about 50 cents in Brazil. So that has to happen to ensure that we diversify economy. And therefore, those key sectors, agriculture, industry, soil minerals, has to really be in a position to compete with the rest of the world. The second to the last is now the fact that we are trying to position ourselves in all these sectors. As we speak today, we import fertilizer for agricultural sector. To feed 200 million people in a country that does not have fertilizer, and the country that has gas, which is the only thing required with their natural air to produce fertilizer, and we cannot do that, we have to import fertilizer into the country, then we're in trouble. So we are not targeting that. We should be in a position to take at least 10% of the market share of fertilizer in the world. And that can be done very quickly. In the last 2 years, we were able to commission 1.5 million tons of urea by Indorama in Port Harcourt. Dangote is going to commission his own plant this year, over 1 million tons per annum. So in a very short time, we'll be in a position to have at least 10 to 20 million tons of fertilizer production. And that will position us to be actually a gas-based industry, apart from the other petrochemicals that we can get out of the country. The last, of course, is the fact that I was talking about, that we can actually have enough to get not only for the economy, but for other parts of the continent of Africa. So to do that, these ones are just the details, but these are the key issues that I wanted to raise so that we can have discussion around them and see what we can do to actually deliver what the country really wanted the sector to do. Because it's not just to produce and sell crude oil and get the dollars and then share it somewhere between National Assembly and presidency and do everything, but to actually be in a position to say that each and every Nigerian can see the value of oil and gas production in the country. Because as long as we continue to import all what we don't need to import, we actually continue to produce what we don't need to produce just for others to come and consume it here, then we're in trouble. So there's very high demand for the sector to really start integrating itself, linking itself with the rest of the economy, so that everybody will have the impact of oil and gas in the Nigerian economy. Because even though we are big in population, we are going to be even bigger. If you look at China and India, I think the next major growth center in terms of population is Nigeria. And Nigeria, if you compare with China and India, softer, because we're going to grow like American economy. Because the American economy grew when it has a lot of energy. They have gas, they have oil, they have everything. Now, in fact, they are net exporters of gas in America. Almost all our gas LNG projects we plan to do from 2000 up to 2011-12, we are targeting American market. But today, we are targeting the same market with them. So they're actually now exporting gas to China. They're exporting gas to other parts of the world. So in that case, that market we have been thinking and dreaming of is no longer there. They're basically not competing with us in both oil and gas sale, because they are braced to have oil and gas in their country. And that's why they're still the largest economy. So my dream is Nigeria can be the same. Nigeria can be in a position not only to satisfy its own economy, but also to satisfy other economies that are hungry of energy. So this one is just to show what we are doing in terms of the actual gas supply itself, because I think we also need to know that supply itself is an issue. So NNPC took a drastic decision last year in collaboration with all the operators in Nigeria to say that let us see what we can do to deliver that 5 BCM of gas. We had that dream since 2005. And now, 13 years after, we're still at around 1 BCM. So actually now say, let us go beyond just saying it. Like the president said about what we have been discussing here. Let us now identify the projects that we believe can deliver those 5 BCM of gas. And we created 7 projects that ran across the entire industry. And those projects we believe in the next 3 years can get that 5 billion cubic feet of gas for the domestic economy. Once that is achieved, we believe we'll be in that position to ensure that we can deliver not only employment generation, but GDP growth and substitution of import. We'll be in the position to be net exporters of many of these things that we currently import in the country. And I think that's what this slide is just talking about. The other one is just also look at what can we do in the oil part. Because gas can do a lot, but also oil can also do a lot of things. If we don't have our refineries that are working, if we don't have our petroleum pipeline lines that are working, if you cannot take products from the refinery gate to the end of the country, to wherever the product is required, we have not started. Because clearly, that's a very, very big disabler to the growth of the economy. Based on what we have done more than 30 years ago, is to say that we should have at least 21 depots in the country. And in those 21 depots, there is nowhere you need products that you can take more than 100 kilometers to go. So there is nothing like plan to travel all the way from Lagos to Maiduguri to take products. There was no plan to take products from Port Harcourt to Yola. There was pipeline there, and the pipelines were already in place. Unfortunately, they're not working. And the reason is very simple. If we don't take care of the facilities, if we don't secure the facilities, it will not happen. So we have more than 5,000 kilometers of pipelines. We have 21 depots of products across the country. But today, if we cannot take the product from Port Harcourt to Aba, less than 100 kilometers by pipeline, it cannot go up to Yola. Because you have to go to Enugu, from Enugu to Makodi, from Makodi to Yola. If you produce from Warri Refinery, you can actually take that product out to Gombe based on the pipeline that's available. But if you cannot go to Benin, from Warri cannot go to Benin, then you cannot go anywhere. And that is a very, very big issue. So whatever we need to do to rehabilitate the pipelines, bring the refineries back to order, stop importation of the products, we will be in a position to also help in diversifying the economy. Of course, this is the end of my presentation. I wish you very good deliberation. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. One more time, please. Let's put our hands together for Malam Bello Rabiu. Okay. He has set the stage with what he hopes will be the icebreaker for the conversations to start in earnest. And to kickstart the conversation, without much ado, I'll bring up the panel members. Let me begin by bringing up the representative of the Executive Secretary of Petroleum Technology Development Fund, Dr. Aliu Bello Gusau, who is unable to join us. Let's welcome his GM Strategy and Planning, Jide Adebolehin. Mr. Adebolehin, you're welcome. Okay, so continuing, our council chairman got a call from the Executive Secretary of NCDMB this morning of him having to stay back in Abuja to attend to a state meeting. Hence, he has sent in NCDMB's General Manager for Projects and Operations. Please welcome Engineer Paul Zuhumben. The Chairman and Managing Director of Chevron Nigeria Limited, Mr. Jeffrey Ewing, is unable to join us because he's not in the country, but he has sent the Director, NNPC CNL JV, Engineer Monde Ovude, to represent him. Let's welcome him, please. Our next panelist is the Managing Director of Shell Nigeria Exploration and Production Company Limited, the offshore business of Shell companies in Nigeria, a graduate of mechanical engineering and has over 25 years of diverse exploration and production experience in Nigeria and Europe. Let's welcome Mr. Bayo Julari. Our next panelist, or discussant, if you like, is the Vice President of Sub-Saharan Africa for Baker Hughes, a GE company, and prior to his current role, he served as a leader for GE Oil and Gas Sub-Saharan Africa from when he joined in July 2016. He was responsible for leading the implementation of oil and gas transformation in SSA. Please welcome Ado Osaribaje. And there are men and women that when you read a citation, abridged or full version of this as an MC, while reading it, you are getting inspired by each letter and each achievement. And the moderator of our panel is one of such men. Of course, I won't go through the whole thing I have here, but suffice that to say that he is the Vice Chairman and CEO and co-founder of the Emerald Energy Resources Limited, an E&P operator of the Niger Delta. Emerald is an independent Nigerian exploration and production company, an operator of OML 141, formerly OPL 229 in continental shelf Niger Delta. He has over 37 years of oil and gas industry experience in management, research and technology development and consulting, and had worked for exploration and production companies Occidental Petroleum and BP as a senior petroleum engineer in charge of field-wide productivity improvement in California, Prudhoe Bay Field, Alaska. And he consulted globally for major companies, for Shell, ExxonMobil, Chevron, across the entire globe. And is among the elite 1% of SPE distinguished members, an inventor, author, who has received distinguished SPE awards from all over the world. In every continent, he has received an SPE award. Please welcome our moderator, Vice Chairman, CEO, and co-founder, Emerald Energy Resources, Dr. Jude Amifuli.
You can do it. Yeah. Where is it? This is we just do it and this is where you change. So you can see this is forward, this is backward.
Okay.
So you can do it from here.
Okay.
Yeah. All of the same.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon in waiting. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you to Dr. Rabiu for your presentation on a very important topic for our great country, Nigeria. Before we start the interactions, I had a few points I wanted to add. And the protocols are things Nigerians do. All protocols are already observed. And any of you who want to be excellent has to add value today. So I'll quickly go through to add to what our lead presenter has for our discussion: justifying economic diversification, gas utilization strategies, forward and backward linkages, leveraging of oil and gas earnings, recommendations, and then conclude. Nigeria GDP at average OPEC oil price exhibits a strong correlation of 0.87. There's a linkage between the oil and non-oil sectors through the exchange of channels, as falling in oil prices oftentimes affect monetary and fiscal policies. Nigeria needs to develop a broader-based economy, diversifying its export to ensure its growth be not dependent and shocked by the global oil price demand. I always make a joke: Nigeria exports wealth and imports poverty. And this is very essential to curb at this level. The oil and gas sector, the threat to the petroleum export market, creates opportunities for refining, gas utilization, and all that spin-off, which we're going to be discussing in greater detail. One that is peculiar to me is many people in this country don't know, first of all, how much gas does Nigeria have. Most of our exploration and production to date are no deeper than 13,000 feet. But the next regime, an area for exploration for gas and gas condensate, is below 13,000 feet. We have not even touched those. And when we have the gas, we have not developed critical linkages as we should. From LNG export, which is where we are all clamoring and shouting, we're making money by exporting LNG. You go into power, Nigeria is blessed. Not only do we have natural gas, we have coal with very low sulfur level. In the US, we've developed clean coal technology. So why are we lacking in power generation? If we dedicated our coal to power generation, the coal in the Middle Belt all the way to Enugu and Ebonyi is very low sulfur coal. And I sit down and I watch as a Nigerian and cry for us. Why should we not have power? So as part of the diversification, government needs to be informed to immediately expand into the development of power from coal. Now, petrochemicals. We have had a few, but we haven't done anything yet. We have NGLs, we have ammonia, urea, fertilizer. Many of us don't know the critical linkages of gas to pharmaceuticals. And one of the things that knowledge is power. The Danish University in Denmark and a Danish company came up with something very unique: conversion of natural gas to animal protein. This has been done in Denmark. I happen to have had the privilege of bringing them to Nigeria so that we can stop these herdsmen killings. If we take gas and generate animal protein, we can feed all the cows in Africa. But we're dilly-dallying as a country. Any wonder why now the South Africans are trying to take away this opportunity? But this is where the university and an industry came up with natural gas to animal protein. If you haven't heard about it, go and Google Unibio. They are the inventors. It makes sense for Nigeria. So we stop all these marauding challenges. The key thing is you put the animal protein plant in the Niger Delta where the raw material is. So you don't have to pipe the cost of pipeline in Nigeria. Produce it where the raw material is and ship it by railroad or whatever to anywhere it is required in Nigeria and elsewhere. This is an area, a big market that is projected to go to 370 billion. So I would encourage us, we, the oil industry, the most investment intensity, that we need to look at this for our own country's sake. We talk of gas to methanol. The value chain, the average Nigerian is unaware of what gas can do. Look at all the sectors and the products that come out of gas and coal. So we export LNG, others use it to produce this, and we import these materials. We should think forward. Leveraging on oil and gas earnings to improve the quality of life. We have universities. The world now is changed. Last week, Friday, Apple shares on the market was $1 trillion. Apple doesn't have oil. California has oil and gas. They have gold. But the most important gold is intellectual gold. That's what is making California the 6th richest economy in the world. Nigeria has the intellectual capacity. If you go to the good old USA, the Nigerians in the diaspora are in every area of intellectual excellence. So we need to tap into these resources that God has given us in order to create wealth and eradicate poverty. So the value chain, the average person thinks oil and gas industry is only selling crude oil. I made a joke to somebody that the lipstick that the women wear is made from gas. They said, well, how can it be? Well, it's petrochemical. So we need to get the value chain right and do the right thing systematically. Oh, I'm going backward, sorry. So just to put in perspective, something that bothers me. Nigeria is the only OPEC country without a foreign-based refinery. Every one of these countries have gone and bought refineries in Europe, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Libya. Why? What is the importance of that? You can export your crude oil to your own refinery in Oklahoma or Texas, and you refine it there. You'll be generating dollars real time. If you needed to bring some of it back to your country, you bring it's your own. Even the Venezuelans, as terrible as their relationship with the US, they have a refinery in the US. So we need to think strategically. Saudi Arabia, as we speak, is buying 2,000 gas stations in China. Saudi Aramco is. Why? Saudi Aramco is going public very soon. And that's part of building value. They're buying gas stations in China, and they're about to buy a refinery in China. So they can export their crude to their own refinery. This is something that is being done, which we have not done. And I encourage that foreign exchange earner, technology transfer medium, crude oil value chain management, and foreign refined crude is not subject to OPEC quota. Diversifying the economy. My friend here is from NNPC. NNPC has JVs. We encourage that we change them to IJVs. Let NNPC go to the stock exchange and raise its money and implement it in a market-driven approach, not politically driven. Because when you have an IJV, the government gets the revenue, royalty, and tax. They don't have to reinvest in an NPC. An NPC can compete with anybody in the market using an IJV concept. Right now, an NPC is politically dominated. If we want to diversify, we need to think outside the box. So I would encourage an NPC and their joint venture partners get to the stock exchange. After all, Shell, Chevron, Exxon, where are they getting their money? Not from the US government, it's from the market. So an NPC should be considered to be IJV. This is my own recommendation. Look at Indonesia. Indonesia used to be a net exporter of crude. Today, a net importer. Let us learn from those who have done it right. So, recommendations. Cost cutting. So our unit technical cost and OPEX is very high in Nigeria. We need to marinate and saute those to lower values. Vertical integration, mergers and acquisitions, and developing technology, because we can manufacture things here in Nigeria. We have the brains to do so. The oil industry is coupled to every one of these industries. So when we are sitting down, look at agriculture. We can help. Ammonia urea fertilizer. Instead of importing NPK fertilizer from Morocco, we should not, but concentrate on our own ammonia urea fertilizer, which is much cleaner and healthier than NPK. So these areas of contribution should be looked at very well. Our economy for many years has been comatose, and it's oil and gas that is feeding it. So ladies and gentlemen, the panelists will now take over and begin to iterate based on what he has presented and the things I've thrown out here. Thank you very much. So we start from the left to the right, if that's okay with you. Start with you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Chair and panel members. The apology of the ES again. I was told last night to represent him, so I will just try and look at the way we look at how we can diversify our economy and what gains we can get from that kind of diversification. So first of all, to give it not a different definition, for a country like Nigeria or for any other country, any commodity that brings it the highest earning in terms of budget, if you want to diversify, you have to move away from it. And from a Nigerian point of view, most of our earnings come from the oil, and therefore we need to diversify, moving away from being dependent on oil. And how do we look at that? We look at almost 80% of government revenue comes from oil. Our view of looking at diversification is how do we use that earnings to stimulate other sectors, to stimulate other various sectors that are non-oil. In fact, our lesson of 2016, which we had the economy going down, it's something that we need to think about, that there was need for us to diversify from what we have been relying on, that is the oil. And if you look at that critically, in the year 2010, the government of Nigeria, as a way of looking at the best way to diversify, came up with the Nigerian Content Act. And in the Nigerian Content Act, the aim of it was to create linkages. Just like the COO mentioned, if we want to achieve diversification, we have to create linkages between the oil and other sectors. And in the Nigerian Content Act, we have about 17 services across different sectors, including surveying, ICT, consultancy, R&D, marine operations, and logistics, finance, and insurance. These sectors and targets that are specified in the Act is deliberate to see how we use the revenue we earn to stimulate those sectors, to grow those sectors, and remove the independence, our independence on oil. And that's why we have the Act signed into law in 2016. As a board, what are we doing to see that we help and we work in terms of the diversification? We have a 10-year strategic planning roadmap to link our activities in with the sectorial sectors. As part of it, we have come up with the concept of the industrial parks. And I remember in the presentation of the COO, he talked about the industrial parks. What do we intend to do to encourage foreign investors, OEMs, setting up in those parks? And what will be produced in the parks will not only service the oil and gas industry. If you have an OEM that's set up in one of the industrial parks, take for example, where he's producing flanges or valves, it will not only service the oil and gas industry. The output from it will also service the rail sector. A typical one is the GE setting up in Calabar. In fact, they are not going to, the gas turbines are not only supplying the oil and gas industry, they are used in locomotives and all that. So instead of removing, when we have challenges with those parts and we start running it, we are exporting foreign earnings again. But you can use it to service it and also support it. That's another way of diversifying and gaining in terms of your spend. And the possible benefits of economic diversification to Nigeria includes increase in government sources of revenue to invest in other areas. The revenue in oil is very important, but as a country, what are we using it? Will we continue to import, or we have to create some independence even through technology? In fact, earnings from ICT is even higher than the earnings we get from oil. So as a country, what are we doing? We have to diversify and develop such sectors. As I mentioned before, the board has embarked on some initiative to support diversification. I've mentioned the Nigerian Oil and Gas Park. We are also working with some of the independents, and we are setting up and establishing, we are going to be part of them. We are not moving away from our responsibilities of being regulators, but we are going to create that atmosphere in terms of establishment of modular refineries. The provision of support for the establishment of modular refineries within the range of 1,000 to 5,000 barrels per day. We have also signed an agreement for the establishment of a 5,000 barrels per day modular refinery in Imo State. We believe if you are, instead of exporting, just like he has mentioned, the chairman has mentioned, if other countries that are producing like Nigerians have refineries internationally to provide some earnings from them, there's nothing wrong for Nigeria also to establish its own refinery as a way of earnings. But we in the board as local content, we are looking at the crisis within the Niger Delta, the bunkering and all others, most especially for diesel to run the boats. And therefore we are collaborating with an independent, taking some shares in it to ensure that we encourage establishment of the refinery. And as a way of providing some fund for entrepreneurs, we have established the $200 million NCDMB BOI fund, provision of $2 million Nigerian Content Investment Fund for provision of loans to oil and gas service providers at single digits will help entrepreneurs to look at things differently, produce things that can be used to support the oil and gas industry and other sectors. We are also working, one of the major desertification, I remember when we were in the room, we were wondering, when we were growing up, we were not seeing herdsmen issues or cattle running down from north to south. But because of the diversification, what are we doing? People are cutting trees everywhere. So LNG, Nigerian Content as a company is working in individuals, that's in terms of PPP, to establish LPG cylinders. We believe that if we are able to set up facilities that will produce these gas cylinders at cheaper rates and make the gas, we have gas. Why can't we make it available and also solve some of the problems? That's the way we look at our diversification. The implication we see from economic diversification on oil and gas value chain includes economic diversification will complement the oil and gas industry as it will ease pressure on the oil and gas industry as the major revenue earner. In fact, diversification will lead to bigger opportunities to utilize and add value to oil and gas resource in country. The economic diversification will promote Nigerian content, which will lead to increased manufacturing in various sectors of the economy. And if we learn from what he mentioned about Indonesia, before they were more of a consuming country, which is the state at which we are in Nigeria. But because they diversify into other areas, look at Singapore. Singapore, just logistics. And therefore, we must start the best way for us to diversify. Thank you.
Okay. Please. All right. Is the microphone on?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity to contribute to the discussions we're having this morning. There is no better time now than to be having this conversation right now. The future of our country and the past history we've had, we cannot allow to continue to remain on just raw commodity exports, because the pricing of those raw commodities is not determined by us, but the external countries. Therefore, as a result, we need to build on the foundation which we have. The foundation which we have, to a large extent, has been the oil and gas industry as the major revenue earner for the country. It is more like a game of Scrabble. You build on the alphabets to create words, and you build on those words to create additional words. The oil and gas industry, what we do, we explore for oil and gas, we produce oil and gas, we export the crude oil, utilize some of the gas for domestic. Some of it also goes as liquefied natural gas outside the world. Therefore, to sustain diversification, we must make sure, first of all, that you continue to sustain that revenue earner, which is the oil and gas industry. So you have to the first set of words to put down in the game of Scrabble is put in the enabling environment to continue to attract investment in this sector. If we recall our basic economics, factors of production, it's not the land, it's not the labor, we have the land. The capital will come once you have a plan. But the entrepreneur, if it's not attractive enough, it's not going to come. So the enabling environment, the fiscals, and what have you, have to be there to enable that. So as it is enabled, we invest in projects, carry out projects, and in the course of doing that, like I said, we produce oil and gas. So it is key that we begin to strategically look at those value drivers, things that will accelerate diversification. We also need to continue to look at collaboration between the various sectors that can help us, and then also identify barriers that will prevent that. So let me hinge on some of what the speakers have said before. Take crude oil. We export crude oil, and then we import finished products. Exporting wealth, importing poverty. So we need to put the right conditions in place to make sure the private sector has better participation in petroleum refining and petrochemicals. When you do that, you get more value for what we have there. The other aspect is with gas. Chevron as a company, we have invested significantly along with our JV partner, NNPC. Without them, we would not have succeeded. To the extent, if you look at between 1997 and now, we have reduced our flares by over 90%. Massive investments in gas gathering and compression. To the extent now in the Western Niger Delta, if you look at the statistics, we're one of the largest suppliers of gas. In addition to that, identifying the barriers which I talked about. Gas is a big engine to diversify. The linkages that you see there, once you have power, other industries will benefit from it. Gas, once you have it, like we talked about, the agro-based industry will be there. In the course of doing work, we have had to be faced with a number of challenges. The willing buyer, willing seller, you must enable that to allow more development in gas. If you regulate it, the entrepreneur is not going to see an interest to want to come in there. We need to privatize the various aspects of the value chain. If government was selling jeans trousers, we won't see jeans trousers to buy when you need it. Let the private sector run it. Use industry standards and technology to make sure that you monitor, measure, optimize the distribution of gas. Develop a strategy to address legacy arrears payments. People have supplied gas, they have not been paid. Remember, the conditions have to be right for the entrepreneur to continue to invest. Continue to drive initiatives in effective utilization of the nation's abundant gas. Enact fiscal terms that encourage development of small to medium-sized assets, reservoirs. We have many of them in place. If the terms are not right, the cash flows are not right, there's no incentive for the businessman to go in there. Establish a competitive deep water gas framework. The deep water is very expensive when you go there. Deep water, the technologies associated with it is very expensive. So the investments must be right to stimulate that. We as a company, in trying to help to sustain the oil and gas industry in Nigeria, we have had to resort to alternative financing along with our JV partner. You may have heard in the news, we went for a $1.2 billion loan, third-party finance, where we are drilling oil and gas wells in the joint venture. And today, as I speak, significant returns coming from that project. We are looking at additional tranches to invest in that same space. If you were here on the opening day, we had one of our colleagues, Mr. Banwell from ExxonMobil, where he clearly demonstrated that government as a regulator made a lot more than as an investor. We in Chevron, we are sustaining gas supply to the domestic market through very high quality injection of gas into that. Significant efforts by us in the Nigerian content space. And here's where I'd like to expand a little bit further. I said earlier that just as a raw commodity exporting country, it's not the way to go. We need to look at where we are today. Through the Nigerian Content Act, we have seen that the oil and gas industry made a lot of investments, working with some yards in Nigeria to the extent today, we have some big fabrication yards sitting out there, looking at the oil and gas industry. Many of those yards could be retooled to service other areas. The network of piping to take gas to different parts of Nigeria. You can take advantage of the steel rolling mill in Abuja, take advantage of the new steel rolling, the pipe mill in the export zone here, Yulong. In fact, with the presence of those steel pipe companies there, you can look at water. So water distribution. Do what we did to NITEL with the GSMs to water. You can set up water companies. Lagos State, partition. If the right laws are there, partition Lagos State into zones. People will bid for water production and distribution. They will do it with pipes. So in essence, with those big fabrication yards, look at other industries like the railway. Look at where the ports are. We have congestion in the Apapa port here. There are several other ports. Delta State, you have like 5 there. Calabar, Port Harcourt, they are there. Therefore, There's an opportunity to expand the railway network, to link them to the ports, link them to the agricultural zones. In fact, we talked about fertilizer, gas. In the north, you have large expanse of land. Same with areas in the south here. With the rail network, you can move products. To the extent, you can move them easily to the port for export. Today, it's very difficult to move your products with all the roadblocks here and there. Before you finish the 35 roadblocks, your goods would have gone bad. So again, I'd like to summarize it. The economic think tank of the country. You need to look at it like a game of Scrabble. The words in themselves may not make sense, but you need to strategically think through, understand the building blocks, enabling environment to sustain the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry is producing oil and gas revenue. They demand services in the construction space, in the services space. They produce gas. What are the linkages that can come out of that? From gas to power. When there is power, other industries will benefit from it. Fertilizer will come out of that. The crude oil, when there's crude oil, the refineries will work, there will be employment. The petrochemicals will be there, it will stimulate some of that. The construction yards are already there. They can begin to build marine vessels, they can retool. So I'd like to summarize at the end of the day that the oil and gas industry is here to support the aspirations of the federal government. We just need to look at it strategically and make sure that we sustain the industry in order to enable diversification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the lead speaker, Mr. Rabiu, and panelists and the audience. From Petroleum Technology Development Fund, representing my Executive Secretary, Dr. Ali Oguso, who will have been here personally, not for other areas. As you all know, at the Petroleum Technology Development Fund, our major responsibility is to develop capacity and capabilities in the oil and gas industry. On top of my head, if you look at this hall, the way we are now, majority we are petroleum engineers, geoscientists, and the other areas that are relevant to the upstream sector of the industry. And when you're talking about diversification, you are mainly talking about mid and downstream. Where are the people to man this in due season? SPE have done very well in relating with students. Majority of our students that are here, if you look at them, if you checklist, they are either in engineering department, geology, geophysics, and all the rest. We studied Brazil, we studied China. The skill sets, the expertise that is required in a proper diversified oil and gas economy is simply not available yet in Nigeria. At the Petroleum Technology Development Fund, we have section with Nigerian University Commission. In some of those skill sets, the curriculum are not even in our universities here. So when you diversify and you begin to grow the institutions, where are the people? That is the responsibility of Petroleum Technology Development Fund. Are we going to go to the days where we will be sending people for first degrees abroad, which we shouldn't do with our history of higher education? So there's a key importance about human capacity building, which we have not thought about. If Mr. Rabiu thinks about NNPC now, when it's properly diversifying, you will suddenly realize the people you have around you are basically people that are trained for upstream activities. So there's a challenge there. And we have started working on it at the Petroleum Technology Development Fund. We have started retooling our programs and the vehicles we are using for capacity building. We've been established since 1972. Became a full starter in 2001. All we have done in our training and capability and capacity development is to train for the upstream section of the industry. We are talking about gas utilization. The kind of expertise, the kind of area of specialization that are required are not available. The young ones that are there, if you share petroleum engineering, geophysics, geology, another area. Hardly will you see petroleum economists. Sorry, Dr. Iledari. Hardly. Another areas that are relevant to diversified economy. Now, at the Petroleum Technology Development Fund, going forward, we are going to emphasize areas of specialization that has to do with mid and downstream in our activities, both within and outside Nigeria. Gas utilization, a whole gamut of area of specialization in gas utilization. If you ask people, they don't even know those areas of specialization, talk less of seeking admission to be trained in those areas. Those of us that were trained years back, we were trained in traditional upstream sector. As I speak to you, I was trained as a geologist, postgraduate training in petroleum engineering, and so many of you here, even the students that are coming. In Brazil, in China, there are areas of specialization because they are well diversified. If we begin to mention it now, it looks strange to some of us. We presented it to Nigeria University Commission. They were looking at it that, what are these areas? What do they do in a proper diversified economy? Now, if Nigeria University Commission, by fair, say, okay, establish this department in Nigeria University, where are the lecturers? So we are developing short, medium, and long term at the Petroleum Technology Development Fund, envisaging full diversification of the industry, preparing to train skillful people that will man this area. Going forward, you will not see scholarship in traditional area of geology, geophysics, petroleum engineering, and co. Because in the next 25, 20, 15 years, those will not be the people that will be needed in the economy when the oil and gas industry is fully diversified. So in our own way, we are envisaging this, and we are working towards it. Talk less of renewable energy. In renewable energy, it's very easy. Renewable energy. The kind of expertise and capabilities that you require in a proper renewable energy setting, we don't just have the skill in Nigeria as it is today. And we need to design special area. Are we going to go to the university to start at our university? Where are the facilities, the physical facilities? Where are the lecturers? Are we going to be sending our people to China, to Brazil, in a short term and develop long-term plan here? Those are very critical challenges. It's very easy to talk about diversification. Where are the people? Even in the IOCs, we have traditional professionals there. So what we are doing going forward at the Petroleum Technology Development, we are coming up with different skill sets, different capabilities, which will be advertised, which young Nigeria, even when you had your first degree, you can retrain yourself to prepare yourself for the next market, which is a diversified market. In any case, we know that the middle and the downstream are the greatest employer of labor. The upstream is already loaded, and the skill set there is very limited. Very, very limited. And in all we're doing, including our research activities that we're financing, we have many of our steering committee members here that are top SP people. We're going to be asking them to go into area of specialization that will be relevant in a diversified oil and gas industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Myself?
Yes.
Okay. Is the mic working?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, thank you very much. Just want to do this in two segments within my few minutes that I've got. When I sat there and listened to Malam Rabiu, I felt really proud by his presentation. It captured the essence. It was simple. It was clear. And I'll come back to why I'm making that emphasis, which is linked to the last comment we have around people are the people that will make the difference. And we need to have competent people who know what they are talking about, who have their basics right. That was the inspiration I got before climbing up here. So thank you very much, sir. And also thank you for the moderator for giving an opening. So my first part is just re-emphasize some of the things that have been said, but maybe in additional perspective. So sorry for boring you in some of these elements. Before I talk about the elements around how do we then move forward. So we talk about the value of diversification to the economy. I think we've heard that, right? We've heard a lot around life beyond oil, right? Particularly the energy transition that you've heard about. We talked about how do we insulate our economy, because if you are so a mono item economy, you are very vulnerable, very vulnerable. We knew, like Mr. Rabiu said, when our production went down, the country went into recession because of one component, when we are such a blessed nation. That's something for us to reflect on. We talk about employment. We've just heard around skill sets. How do we ensure employment? Keep in mind that about 20 million people enter the Nigerian labor market every year. 2 million people. 2 million people enter the Nigerian labor market every year. Something to think about. I think the advantage of diversification has been said. It cannot be overemphasized. For us, Nigeria, we're well blessed. We've talked about significant land mass suitable for agriculture. We've talked about that. We have wealth, we have minerals, we have other elements that are there that gives us, that just makes diversification almost like something that you could just say is a walkover. We have a large population. It depends on the way you look at it. The biggest economies around the world today are leveraging population. The whole American insulation around economy is about population. China is about population. If you orient your population towards productivity, then population is a blessing. So we have the population that allows us to do that. And also, let's keep in mind what is also happening around the growing middle class and the young population coming into our midst. I think we've had a couple of examples of diversification, but I just want to bring it back into the room just to refresh us. We've had comments made around Texas. Those days, technology, it was manufacturing, and it was health. Those were the three things that Texas used when they stepped away from oil. And those things make the key difference. We've talked about UAE. So what did UAE do? They focused on media, telecoms, tourism, manufacturing, and commercial aviation. Almost every one of us who are linked to UAE, you can feel those pulse. You know what they did with Emirates. Those are areas where they made selective strategic choices, where their big diversification is going to be, and they diverted their resources to focus, because you cannot also spread over 100 things. The impact will not be felt. Then Qatar, they were also very focused. They went into real estate very clearly, financial services, knowledge-based. Those who have been to Qatar will know that. Also tourism, and they have a technology city, which is a technology center, similar to what Mr. Rabi talked about, the industrial park. And they also have the sports city. So the point I made around this example is that diversification also needs to be conscious. And you need to make choices. If you spread too thin, the impact will not be felt. And that's it. Now, in terms of what are the concerns, I think we've talked a few about some of those concerns. I think Mr. Rabiu talked about the infrastructure. It's just not enough. And as long as those infrastructures are not there, it's very difficult. Power is the biggest one. My heart bleeds when I go to Ghana and I see stable power. You know, it's just incredible. And a lot of our industries that we're talking about diversification. A lot of them moved to Ghana several years because they have stable power. So power is critical for us to be able to the microeconomic uncertainties makes it very difficult for investors. Is a major concern. Anyone who wants to invest, if you have uncertainties in your microeconomic, investors, no matter what you do, are not going to put their money. So that's the major concerns for me. I was really pleased listening to our panelists from PTDF talking about low skills. There's for those who have watched the world around digital transformation, there's a saying that in 10 years' time, some of the skill set that will be required in our world are not things we are doing today. More than 40%. Just think about it. It's very scary. 40% of the things that will be employable are very different. They are not things we actually know we're about doing today. And if some of us are in doubt, just look 10 years back and ask yourself, how many of us knew that iPhone, Samsung will be what they are today? That the gigabyte will be carrying on those systems will be what they are today. So something to think about. Foreign exchange access is critical. And I think we also talk about the whole issue around fiscal policy and all of that. So I think the other thing I wanted to touch on briefly is, I think a lot have been said around the value chain. So I was reflecting. I have a few more scripts that I wanted to talk about, but I want to pack them because a lot of them have been talked about. I was then reflecting on what I've heard so far, the presentations I've heard so far, and a few things started to come into my mind. Where I was sitting, one of our senior colleagues asked us, so what is holding us back? After when you listen to Mr. Rabiu's presentation, very clear. So what's holding us back? And how do we move forward? A couple of things came to my mind. I'm very pleased to start with human capacity, which is why I went to Mr. Rabiu. I felt really proud of him. And I mean it. Because if you have the right people, the round hole pegs and round holes in areas where we want things to be done, this country will move forward. So human capacity is number one. Apart from human capacity in our oil and gas business, human capacity in terms of diversified economy is a key element we need to focus on. We cannot do any of this without building human capacity. And hence the collaboration with the universities we've talked about has to be more solid than what it is today. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. The other thing that came to my mind is what we've always talked about with respect to all our SPEs, is the public-private sector partnership. Now, what came to my mind again was around the concept of corporate citizenry. A lot of us, IOCs, other companies in Nigeria, we say, yeah, we are corporate citizens of Nigeria. What do citizens do? Citizens are equally accountable and supportive of governance, and also accountable for delivery of how that economy is enhanced. And I'm asking myself, as a corporate citizen for Shell that I work for, there's a lot that we're doing. I don't want to talk about all of that now because it's a long list. But how do we move forward? What came to my mind is that the 7 big wins that Rabi talked about, we don't need to create something really, really new. We can start creating new things every day. If we all deliver and align on 7 big wins, this country will move forward. It will. He also mentioned 3 government priorities. He said security, economy, and corruption. Diversification is linked to economy, so I packed that. Security and corruption. Most of us don't talk about corruption. We do talk about security. But frankly speaking, if we don't rally and support the government to fight corruption, drive accountability and transparency, no matter how much effort we put in, it's like pouring water into a basket. Again, what am I saying here? If we are corporate citizens, align with government on those priorities, we should all hold ourselves accountable to what we're doing in contributing to realizing those things. Because without a secured environment, without an environment that where corruption is not tolerated and there is no impunity with corruption, we cannot move forward. So that's also around alignment. And what I like to add to those 2 elements is around the whole issue around diversification is a diversification roadmap. Because we're a big country and because we have different citizens, if some of the things, and that's probably one of the things that the SPE should get us from this conversation, a diversification roadmap, it allows us to see the world from the eye of diversification. And some of these ideas that have been put together will become more clear to a lot of us on how we contribute to the journey. Last but not the least is what I call commitment. I'm thinking about, and this linked to this public-private partnership. The government has talked about 7 big wins. We've talked about this area of elements. What I always find is that we make these strategies and we make this plan, but we don't deliver. The lack of delivery is linked to different interpretation of what we think we all understand. But it's also linked to lack of accountability. Because when we don't deliver, nothing happens. So I'm asking myself, if we have a situation where the government listens to the private sector listens to the government, the academia is part of the conversation, listen to each other, and we clear on what we all need to contribute to that roadmap, and we sign up to it. Every year when we have this conversation, we'll be looking at our performance towards our joint commitment. And it can be made public because it is made public. Because what I find in Nigeria is that because of lack of accountability, we all get away with underperformance. And because that performance is not transparent, we can't hold everybody. Even if I see Chike now and say, Chike, last SP you told me you're going to deliver this. Even when he sees that he's coming to meet me, he will be thinking. But when you don't have a transparent system to drive performance and drive accountability, a lot of these, because so Mr. Chairman, my landing is we need a diversification roadmap that integrates all what we're discussing. That diversification roadmap should be underpinned by a jointly signed commitment that shows what each of us is going to contribute to delivering that roadmap. And that every year, as we reflect on our performance against that, and we show where we are and how we're moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think we've talked a lot about the benefits of diversifying this economy. One thing I'd like to touch on is what happens if we don't, right? So I think Bio talked about telecoms. 20 years ago or so, if I had asked this room to put up their telephones, probably half of you would have put up Nokias, and then the other half maybe would have put up Blackberries. Now, if I asked you to do the same today, there definitely would not be a single Nokia in the room, and there may be one or two Blackberries that will be in the room, right? Both those companies today are actually out of business in the form that they were 20 years ago. So, and that was simply because both of them had a single winning product that they kept on leveraging off or feeding off, right? And were not able to transform themselves or remain relevant to the changes in their industry or in their environment, right? So if you think about that and you think about Nigeria with the hydrocarbon or the fossil fuels, right? Today, Portugal is able to go 4 days a year without having full power, without any fossil fuel. Most European countries have taken a charter to completely move away from hydrocarbons by 2040, which is not a long time away. If you look at the map of importation of hydrocarbons in the US 5 years ago, Nigeria was a massive contributor towards the US importation. Today, they're not. So if you continue to project this forward, then you would say by 2030, 2040, who's going to actually buy our oil and gas, right? Where's the market actually going to be? And will we be relevant in that? In fact, will there be a hydrocarbon market in 20 or 30 years, right? Even if there is, because I think it will still be relevant, it will be significantly diminished to what it is today. So then, how do we as a country in 20 or 30 years' time remain relevant in our marketplace, right? So I approach it not even from the point of view of it's a good thing. It's from the point of view is that the consequence of not doing anything is actually far greater than the benefits of doing something. So it's almost an existential imperative for us as a country to actually look at doing things differently. The other point that you can look at is that in the 1960s, input output globally, right? As of 2009 or 2010, that contribution had dropped to 0.1%, right? Same country, same people. In fact, we had more people, right? But we're not really contributing to the agricultural output. By comparison, in the same period, Brazil today contributes about 6% of the global agricultural output. And by the same token, Brazil actually produces more oil and gas than Nigeria. So you can't really say that they went for a substitution of one product versus the other. At the same time, we have the average, I was led to believe that the average age of the Nigerian populace is about 18. 67% of our population is less than 18. So if you project forward, all those people are going to get married, they're going to have children, and they're going to need something constructive to do. So to Bayo's point, if the population growth, and we're growing at about 3% a year, so the population growth can actually be a tremendous enabler, or it can be a catalyst for the collapse of the country. Simply because if people don't have something productive to do, or if they're not able to feed, then you can simply imagine what happens. And a big part of China's policy, for example, is really about continuing to create economic prosperity in order to avert civil disobedience. So if you look at us and you project at the growth rate of 3% a year, in 10 years' time, right, we're going to actually have 30 million more people living and, in some instance, working in this country. So by the same token, if I use Bayo's projection of 2 million employable people a year, it means that in 10 years' time, we need an additional 20 million jobs. So if you look at the upstream sector, at best, right, I don't have this exact figure, but at best, I would probably say we've got about 20 or 30,000 people working in the upstream sector in this country. So even if you were to magnify that 100 times, we still won't be able to create those 20 million jobs that will be required in 10 years, right? So my point is that we actually don't have a choice, right? If the country is going to survive, we need to do something else. And there have actually been a lot of inroads in several sectors that have been talked about, right? I think the biggest opportunity still is agriculture. Now, tied into that, there is the downstream or the midstream and petrochemical area. I mean, we've made a lot of progress in terms of, as Malam Rabiu showed, in terms of the investments that have gone on probably in the last 5 years. But what I would say, and the challenge that I always make when I have these discussions in social gatherings, is we need to stop comparing ourselves to the lowest common denominator and start trying to be more ambitious in terms of what we look at, right? So, you know, when we talk about now getting to the point of 630,000 metric tons in petrochemical capacity, there are countries that are much smaller than us that are producing 63 million tons, right? So it's really about where do we set the bar and how do we want to go and what are the imperatives to achieving that. I think one of the biggest things that that I would like to see from a government standpoint is, irrespective of politics, continuity of policy, right? As an investor, as a private investor, the most important thing that I look at is the continuity of the policies, such that I can then evaluate my investment in a stable framework, right? So if my tax is going to be 20% on profit or deemed profit or revenue or whatever it is, then I need to have the certainty that that tax rate will remain for the next 10 years. If I'm required to make certain contributions, then I need to understand what those would be over an extended period of time. And we can't deal with arbitrary changes in public policy. The other thing that I think is critical is when you talk about ease of doing business, right? Today, to start up, I had this request from somebody the other day on WhatsApp as to what it takes to actually start up a business in the country. And there are about 5 or 6 of us on the group. And between all of us, we actually couldn't figure out and list all the requirements to start up a business in this country. And it takes about 28 days after we went through this whole thing. It will take you about 28 days to start up a business if you're going from start to finish, where you compare with other countries that can do it within a week, right? So the ease of doing business is critical because there are a lot of, as you all know, probably even yourselves, there are a lot of great ideas, there are a lot of potential entrepreneurs in this country, but the bureaucracy and the complexity of actually being able to start up something and take it from start to finish, end to end, puts off quite a few people and puts off quite a few investors. We've also talked about the human capital development. For me, I see the challenge as somewhat different, right? Because, and this might be a bit controversial, but I feel that we need less graduates, right? And the reality of it is, if I'll ask anybody in the room, when last you called somebody, you had a leak in your bathroom, and you called somebody to fix it. First of all, how difficult was it to get that person? And then second, did the work they did completely, or their approach, did it completely defy any kind of logic that you would have applied to the problem? So if you think about it, when you look at the size of our population, we're never going to create the capacity at the tertiary level to actually educate, that volume of people to that level. And I don't believe that we even need to educate that volume of people to that level. But when you look at the artisanal level, when you look at the technician level, right, even in our industry, we bring technicians today from the Philippines, from Indonesia, and from other kind of middle-income countries, right? And that's because we actually don't have that technician level, which is fundamental and key to driving any kind of industrialized economy, right? And so I think that when you look at the capacity development, we actually have to look at it at several levels. And we actually have to consider the artisanal level, as this is probably, the most critical piece of the puzzle, right? Because without that piece, then the implementation of any kind of plans at the end of the day, if you look around, even some of the buildings that you go to, right? We have fantastic architects, but then you walk into some buildings and you can't see a single straight line because the person that has done the finishing, right, doesn't have the skills or the patience. Even though the building design from the outside, you have a world-class architect that has done this. So I think that there are different elements that we need to address. And from my perspective, what I'll leave you with in summary is that we don't have a choice, right? We actually need to, as a country, do something different. Continuity is critical to anything it is that we're going to do. And as an investor, that is how we look at the decisions to invest or not invest. Ease of getting things done. There was a circular that came out the other day about people that don't pay their taxes, right? But the reality is also that even those that want to pay their taxes, it's actually very cumbersome and very difficult to pay your taxes even if you wanted to. So just that whole ease of doing things and getting things done really, really has an impact, right, on the revenue generation and the income generation of the country. And then finally, the capacity building. But the capacity building really at all levels and bringing, I think, a sense of pride back to the technician level and the artisanal level, right? I think that everyone in the country is too obsessed with wanting to be a manager or wanting to be a chief or a king that we've forgotten that where the rubber meets the road is actually at the technical, and by technical, I mean technician level.
Thank you. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from the panelists. Right now, it's time for the audience to ask some critical questions and get some clarifications as may be required. So, my friend, could you please select the questions?
Yes, I will. And quite a lot of questions we have today, a whole lot of questions. So what I have tried to do is look at questions that are similar and merge them together to ask. I would ask each of the panel members the questions you've written, and if we have time, we'll take another round of 6 questions. A couple of them are comments. If we have time, I'll read that. This first question from Oshinowo Gwenga of Laser Engineering, Dr. Amefule, is for you. He is asking he says, what is the contributions of all IOCs? I suppose he's also talking about the producers. What is their contribution in Nigeria in terms of domestic gas utilization? So just note the question and I will come back to you shortly. This next person, Dr. Akuma Ojil from Center for Gas Refining and Petrochemicals, University of Port Harcourt. You've asked 3 questions, but because I want to accommodate as many delegates as possible, I'll take 1 from your 3. And the one I'm picking from your 3 is the question to Dr. Bello Rabiu. The university, so Dr. Rabiu, this is for you. So the university can have a center to produce items needed by the IOC. Is NMPC and PTDF thinking on these areas? This will reduce capital flight. So if there is any plan to empower universities to produce what the operators would need. This next question is coming from Igwe Andrew. You've asked 2 questions. I'll pick 1 again. And I'm picking the question that you have here for the representative of Mr. Jeffrey Ewing. He's asking, as partners to economy improvement, what are your structures in developing local entrepreneurs to achieve diversification? So that's for you, Mr. Ovude. This next question is for the PTDF, and it's coming from Shola Adebanwo of Chevron. Shola is asking you, Mr. Adebulahi, social risk management is one of the key skills that has helped oil and gas industry survive the socially complex operating environment in Nigeria. Is PTDF considering helping to develop capacity in this area? This question is coming from Jide Pano Kafo of Seplat. You've asked 2. I will take 1, and the one I'm taking is to Mr. Bayo Ojulari. It says, with the knowledge that if you spread too thin, the impact would not be felt. In your opinion, what is the lowest hanging opportunity for diversification for the country? So distinguished panel members, I will allow you to take on these ones, and then I will come back and so Dr. Amefule.
Thank you very much. The question that was asked of me is the contribution of the IOCs on the gas production. The IOCs, being the initial explorers and producers in the country, had over several years managed the gas sector, but more emphasis like Chevron, as you know, in the Western Niger Delta, they have done quite a bit on the utilization of gas. So has Shell done in the Eastern Niger Delta, but we are not yet at an optimum level. Many of the indigenous operators are now realizing from day one that gas has value, and therefore trying to look for gas solutions as early as possible. So learning from the mistakes of the past, many of the upcoming gas has to be unassociated gas. Before now, all the gas was associated. So there was no critical part of how to manage it without flaring. So the IOCs have done what they have, and we have learned from all of those. And moving forward, I believe that both the IOCs and NMPC plus the indigenous companies are going to make gas exploration an area of emphasis and put more weight to it. Thank you.
Yes, the next question was for Dr. Rabi.
Thank you. I think my question was a shared question with PTDF. It's to do with if the universities can produce the required input into the industry, what can NNPC and PTDF do? And I think that was eloquently discussed by the PTDF panel member here, that a lot is being done. And the most important thing is the fact that there are a lot of other areas of expertise required in the industry, especially in the diversified economy that we are thinking about, that is not currently being done. And they're working very hard to get that done. The only thing the industry can do, not only NPC, is just to support through scholarships, through research and other things. But the actual entity now in the country that can support these efforts of training the needed manpower, it will be the PTDF. For NNPC, maybe just to say more about what we have in terms of content. It's true the industry has a lot of upstream expertise, but NNPC itself had less than 20% upstream expertise. Most of our staff are actually downstream and midstream staff who have been in that business for a long time and who have been finding it difficult even to implement what they have been trained on. Because as we speak, if you look at the last 20 years, the capacity utilization of Nigerian refineries is about 22-23%. So if you have somebody that has been trained to maintain a refinery and within 300 days of a year, he only worked for about 50, 60 days, you can't imagine that he will really get appropriate training. So, but for other industries coming, and that's why we really support the idea of having the midstream and downstream up and doing. If we had started the upstream the same way, we would have been in the same direction. The upstream had started as a private sector-led business. Government is only there as basically an inactive participant, but not trying to be part of it. Because again, if you look at the history of this country, even though some of the original blocks were allocated to NNPC and NPDC, NPDC just started real production in the last couple of years, real production of 50,000 barrels per day. So it is important that we diversify the expertise requirement as well, but also note that if there is no job to do, that expertise will not be required. If we produce 2 million people per year now, and mainly graduates, and they don't have job, if you start producing those who are required in petrochemicals, those are required in fertilizer, and within a very short time, you get the graduates and get the trainees, but you don't have the industry. So I think by the time we have the industries, all this thing will happen. And it's very important for us to prepare, but it's also more important to know the implication of training without the jobs. Thank you very much.
Okay, the next question is for Mr. Ovude. Engineer Ovude, please.
All right, thank you very much. I think that is a very good question you have asked, that as an IOC, what structures do we have in place to help build local capacity? And I think by the time I finish answering that question and connect it to diversification, we will understand where the opportunity lies. So as a company involved in oil and gas production, we do a number of projects to bring those oil and gas fields into production. In the course of doing that, even before the enactment of the Nigerian Content Act, we used in part some services in country and some overseas. But with the passage of the Nigerian Content Act in projects, you've seen massive utilization of fabrication yards in Nigeria. If you go back to the days of our deep water project at Agbami that came behind the Bonga, you know, yards like Niger Dock, the GLTA yard in Port Harcourt that has transformed to another yard now, they built some of these structures that we utilize to develop these oil fields. Very recently, in 2017, you may have heard of one of our fields called Sonam. Sonam platform is a very complex structure built in Niger Dock yard there. In terms of people who build that platform, these are Nigerians, graded welders, All you needed was project managers, project management, mostly Nigerians, a few experts to support that. Running the cables, installing them, these are Nigerians. There are a lot of Nigerians out there with the skills to do these things. But like I alluded earlier to, the businessman, the entrepreneur, which is that fourth factor of production, is not going to come in unless he sees an opportunity to make money. And that's where the government side comes in. You create that security, enabling environment, the physicals, where government cannot contribute immediately, you give in terms of incentives. When they start business, you have many more people working that you can tax a little bit, small from and so forth. In addition to that, even when we do things like field development studies, in fact, the individual who raised the question, your company does some studies for us. So part of the things that we do, we also give studies to some of these indigenous companies to do for us. They come, we exchange ideas, they learn from that too, we're building their capacity. There's another company somewhere in the Middle Belt area in Nigeria interested in barite. Chevron is gone, helped them with quite some equipment, and they are producing barite, which is intended for the oil and gas industry. If you go around the Warri axis, some of the local community contractors who have worked for us, we have built their capacity quite a lot. Idmon is one of them. Marine platforms, they help us with deployment of trees in the deep water space there and so forth. We have other organizations that we support, not directly Chevron related, so to speak, the partner initiatives for the Niger Delta. There is an NGO effort. We go into areas and help in empowering people in communities, the aquaculture, different aspects in those areas. But here lies the main thrust of the matter. To rely on the oil and gas industry alone is not enough. Many of these capacities that you have created, thanks to the Nigerian Content Act, are out there. When there's a downturn in commodity price for the oil and gas industry, and there's a cessation of projects, the yards are going fallow. It shouldn't be so. The capacity is already there. You now need to re-diversify to support other areas. I talked about some of the big companies like Niger Dock Construction. For the sake of argument, what will it take to build trailers which the tractor, the head of the trailer pulls? What will it take to? We build sophisticated platforms in those places. If Nigeria decides to build just fishing boats, trawlers, for the sake of argument, there's more than enough skilled welders, project managers, Nigerians here to do that. The conditions have to be right. Maybe you grant a tax incentive, and then the Chinese, who are getting concerned about the cost of production in their countries, are looking for countries to get into. East Africa, they have made significant inroads there. But however, while they are coming, you still have to protect your people to some extent, but also create the incentives where they can bring their money, spend their money, and take some of that money away too. Government is not the best spender of money, except in some certain areas. Security, protect your national boundaries, law, order, and so forth. But it is the private sector that creates jobs, that creates wealth. So when I use the word enabling environment, I fail to expatiate a little bit further, but my rest panelists, they've done a good job in that area. This is what we have to do. The industry has created it. We have instrument and electrical engineers in the industry. These folks can bring electrical components together, create things. Microcontrollers are there. We have people who can program them. They're very smart girls and boys who have come out of school now. What we need to do is incentivize, create the conditions such that a new generation of entrepreneurs get into space and move our economy from an export raw commodity economy to a learning economy. An economy that looks at some other countries that have done it and looks at where we are and builds on those like a Scrabble game. Thank you.
Okay, quickly, very quickly now. Mr. Bayo Jularisa, your question? You can take
Okay.
it. Yes.
Please
be brief.
Is it okay?
Yes.
All right. So you asked, what do I see as the low-hanging fruits? And I'll just, before this panel, I like the last comment about learning. So I've also learned from this panel. So my script has been improved. So if you had asked me before we started the panel, I would tell you I would just focus on two things: agriculture, petrochemicals, stroke refineries. Agriculture, we got the blessing. Natural blessings are there. And it's all over. And that will feed the nation, will export food, will do more. Petrochemical, God has blessed us with the feedstock to petrochemicals. Gas to do the fertilizers, refineries that allow us to be able to refine in country and export or even purchase refinery, as I've heard. Based on the conversation from the panel, I'm adding a third one to my own personal agenda. And I call it education and technology. Education, not just for university graduate and master's degree, but education in the context we've heard around creating the cadre of technicians and people who would do, and technology, because we need that to move forward. To conclude, those three things will not do it. The enabling environment is key, and there are 5 of them I'd like to remind us. Back to Malam Rabiu. Without a secured environment, nobody will invest in this place. Without collectively denouncing corruption and not just saying everybody else is, I'm okay to be corrupt, but everybody else cannot be corrupt. Without denouncing corruption, all our effort will be in vain. Number 3, the infrastructure we've talked about. If you don't have the infrastructure, most places we've talked about that have diversified, infrastructures was one of the main focus where the government has created that connect the stuff. Without those infrastructure, power, pipeline networks, we cannot get things. Ease of doing business, I don't need to replay that. As long as the environment is very cumbersome to do business, to invest, to get things done, we cannot conclude. And number 5 was what I mentioned before: effective public, private, and academia partnership. And it is very important to keep that in mind. Remember what I said. There has to be a shared vision, not NNPC vision, not government vision. Vision shared by NNPC, shared by the private sector, shared by the investors, that we all committed to, and that we drive performance of that roadmap. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. You've not taken your question?
I will take it right away.
Okay, please go ahead.
Now,
Please.
yeah, the first question, Mr. Rabiu has done justice to it. Other than, I will add one area. At the PTDF, there's a program we call University Upgrade Program. We go to each university and pick a very relevant department, a department that's relevant to oil and gas, like geology, petroleum engineering. We build brand new department, develop state-of-the-art laboratory, facilities for library, offices, and everything. We have done 24 universities across the country. We done gas engineering, University of Port Harcourt, petroleum engineering at UI, geology in Nusuka, petroleum chemistry in Sokoto, chemical engineering in ABU, and several all over the country. But the point I want to make, because I suspect the person who has the question from the universities cannot be turned to another Niger Dock. Universities, the facilities that are supplied there are for training. In most cases, for training of undergraduate and MSc students. Each time I travel across the country, university lecturers keep asking me, why can't they do petrophysics analysis for the oil and gas industry in their laboratory? And simple answer, those laboratories are just for training undergraduate students. University facilities cannot be comparable to what the industry will do. Niger Dock will do. Those are factories set for production. That is what I will add to Mr. Rabiu. As per our social risk management, I tell you, we have thought about it, and it's part of our key program. When we did skill gap analysis, there's one particular instance that was very, very educative. In China, as you will know, China, they have a lot of rural inhabitants. Their rural community is very strong, massive population. But because they have developed their social risk management program, is smooth for their diversification program in all their schools. There are social risk managers in every look and corner you go to. And that make it very smooth for their diversification program in all the communities across China. So those are that area is one of the key areas we're going to, be rest assured.
Okay, thank you. Let's just take two more questions, one for NCDMB, one for Ado, and we'll conclude this. NCDMB, this question is from Okwoma Najofo of Adas Petroleum. Okwoma is saying why you are investing in the refinery instead of being the regulator. So when you answer, you take that as well. Okay, for Ado, a couple of persons want to know, what should we focus on moving forward? Okay, I read this one. It says, how do we take the discussion away from this room? Can we pick one or two areas to diversify amongst the
work with government to see how we increase Nigerian content participation in non-oil sectors as a diversification? I'm convinced we are all aware here that NCDMB as a board have presented a paper to the National Assembly on ways how we can get inroad in Nigerian content in other sectors like construction, power, ICT. This happened even before the 7th Assembly. And before the 8th Assembly, as of today, we have submitted a paper on how we can improve on Nigerian content or implement Nigerian content, most especially in the power sector and the ICT sector. We even have guidelines of how to improve our participation in the ICT, which is not controlled by the oil and gas industry. So actually we are driving that. We have submitted our papers and it's been studied. We believe that government will look at that area. And the other question of our participation in Nigerian content, one of our major mandate is to see how we can have Nigerian participate in the activities in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. Our participation is not as an operator. This is where you have a private person developing a modular refinery, and it has problem of funding. And as part of our mandate of increasing and supporting Nigerians' participation in that kind of industry and to gain some technology, that's why we have gone in to take some shares by providing him that environment, but not directly participating. We will not want to participate directly in the operations because that will take us away from our primary role of regulatory. Take note, we are also going to regulate his activities in terms of the setting up of the refinery to ensure that all what he is doing, just like you see all the IOCs have mentioned, he does that in such a way that he will develop capacity, he will do most of the fabrication. So it's another avenue for us to train and develop people in the fabrication. If you notice, Niger Delta Refinery, I think they have a modular refinery which is producing diesel. The fabrication and most of the activities were carried out outside the country. But with the modular refinery, it's going to become like a training ground for us to have the technology and also fabricate them out of our yards, which is another way of developing our entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ado, please.
From my standpoint, I'll just add to what Bayo had already mentioned, because those two sectors that he initially talked about in agriculture, in refining and petrochemicals, probably in terms of low-hanging fruit, the quickest to development, and also in terms of impact, right? When you look at the numbers of people that you can employ, right, and the associated impact that you can have are also the biggest impact. And finally, there is as well an interrelation to them, right? Because one of the constraints to our agro economy is fertilizers, right? So then when you're on the downstream side and you're producing fertilizer locally, then you're bringing down your overall total cost of agricultural input, right? So there is also an interrelation between the two industries and the impact that they can have. And you know, it's very interesting. There've been some questions around what the different companies doing. I think I can safely say that to that end, we're having discussions around that industry. We're having discussions around, you know, the refining and petrochemicals. So there are actually a lot of things that are happening already in terms of driving these agendas, right? And I'm hopeful that as long as the government continues to create that enabling environment, then these ideas will move from conversations to actual contractual obligations and implementation, and we'll start to see the, you know, the benefits within the next, I would say, probably 3 to 7 years. Because if you look at some of these things and these industries, it is a mid to long-term horizon for you to actually see the impact in the wider economy. And that's why, for me as well, that continuity of policy, irrespective of government, is critical.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're closing now. This is just a comment from our former council chair. He's raised an issue around the population growth. Just to save time, let me not read through it. But his suggestion as a way of solution is that he really thinks that we need to start flagging population control as one of the key measures needed for the viability of the, well, forgive me, I didn't see that second part. But the bottom line of what my former council chair Saigiwa is saying is that we should flag population control as a way of ensuring that we achieve what we're talking about for diversification of the economy. So very quickly, I call on my council chairman. Council chair, we want to, as SPE, present an award, a special award to our COO Upstream. Is an SPE, Nigerian Council Public Service Award. At the start of the conference, we gave a public service award to ARD, gave a public service award to the GMD. The Nigerian Council of SPE is giving to the COO Upstream. Congratulations, sir. We thank you for what you do.
Now, let me just say a few words. The CEO Upstream has been a great supporter of the Society of Petroleum Engineers Nigerian Council. And whenever we call him for an event, he shows up, he gives of his time. And this is not only within the country. At the last year, 2017, Annual Technical Conference and Exhibition, which was held in San Antonio, he was a guest for, I think, 3 days. And he participated in all the events there. Now, I also understand that you may also be joining us for this year's ATC, and we'll be there to welcome you as well. But this is to thank him for all the support we have had over the years from him, and to continue to partner with you and NNPC going forward. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Please, let's give a resounding applause to our moderators. Thank you, Dr. Amefule. Thank you, Engineer Zuhumben. Thank you, Engineer Vudi. Thank you, Engineer Adebulahi. Well, thank you so very much. Mr. Julari, thank you so very much. Sir, just hold on. You take a group photograph with them. Just hold on. Gentlemen, please let's rise to a group photograph. So we are going to have at 1 p.m. in this hall, section officers meeting. But once we rise from here, delegates lunch is served inside the Iris Hall. It's ready to go. And the VIP lunch will be served inside the 1415 restaurant. And we all know the access to that one is the VIP pass. But please, when you rise from this place, do not take the sound active headphones. We beg you. We are still looking for 15 that had gone missing yesterday. We thank you for understanding. We appreciate you. Remember, this evening at 6 o'clock, we have the annual awards in the other side of the hall. Come back this evening. Let us network some more, dance some more, give out more awards. I'll see you in a bit. And then, of course, in the evening, do not forget, for the evening, I am told that the tickets that grants you access is available. Just go to the registrations booth and they will tell you how you will get the ticket. The ticket for the evening's dinner is available. Go to the registration booth and get information as to how you get it. And for BOT members, the council chairman will see to your tickets. Thank you very much. Thank you. You've all been far too kind, and see you later. Abiodun, where are you? Come and get your microphones. Sharp. Abiodun.
I'm one Sheni. Aroma Maria. Help me. I can't open every door and every window. So get on, Satan. Oh, Satan, be gone. Get on, Satan, be gone. Satan, be gone. Get on, Satan, be gone. I'm one shitty. For all my career. Satan, be gone. Get on, Satan, be gone.